Joining me now is president of Staying True to America's National Destiny and radio host of The Awakening, Bishop E.W. Jackson. Bishop, good to see you again, sir.
Thanks for having me, Liz. Appreciate it.
All right, let's just dive right into this topic. This is a pretty good one. First question, are black pastors purposely breaking the law here to help Hillary get elected?
Well, to tell you the truth, Liz, they've never really had to confront whether it was the law because they've been given a pass. It's only when a pastor is preaching biblically conservative principles about how Christians should vote, not even endorsing candidates, that it becomes an issue. Controversial issues around black pastors supporting Democrat candidates, it just doesn't exist. Can you imagine the IRS going after a black pastor for having endorsed Barack Obama? It ain't gonna happen.
No, that would be a strange thing to see. So this law, though, this law is kind of strange. Clergy can advocate as individuals at separate venues. They can host voter forums at their church, voter registration drives. But if they talk about an official endorsement from the actual pulpit itself, they apparently risk losing tax-exempt status, although, like you said, we don't see that. In your opinion, is this law taking the idea of separating church and state, is it taking it too far?
Yeah, it's a violation of First Amendment rights. Look, my attitude is whatever the law is, it should be enforced equally. I think every pastor ought to have the right and does have the right to say from the pulpit what he or she believes. Now, the church shouldn't be endorsing candidates as a church because people don't give their offerings to go help a candidate. But the pastor should be able to tell the congregation, this is what I believe, this is why I believe it. And based on that, these are the people I'm going to support, and then the congregation can do accordingly.
Right, and let me play the devil's advocate here just for a second, because Donald Trump said he opposes this law. It's actually called the Johnson Amendment, and it restricts clergy from officially endorsing candidates or preaching politics in the issue-related sense. But devil's advocate here, this also prevents churches from becoming like super PACs or from campaigning directly. Would there be an issue with that balance if this law were repealed?
Well, look, people can always create anything and call it a church, and I would be concerned about that. But I'm a pastor, Liz. I'm not going to turn my church into a PAC for a candidate. The PAC that my church represents is the PAC of Jesus Christ. And so we're going to preach the gospel. But that has implications on the social and political and cultural level. And I'm certainly going to encourage them to make sure they live out those principles in how they vote and who they support.
Right. As a pastor, I want to ask you this too, because about the role of clergy in elections, because as a Catholic myself, I go to Mass, and regrettably, I hear sermons talking about social justice because Catholics are notoriously liberal on spreading the wealth around, and it bothers me to hear these sermons, which I disagree with politically, but it also bothers me in a larger sense because the Catholic Church is one of the largest institutions in the world that is still so outspoken about the horrible thing that is abortion, and you don't hear anything about that. What role should priests, pastors, what have you, clergy play in talking about issues specifically?
Too many pastors are theologically educated, but ideologically ignorant. They don't realize social justice is a Marxist concept, and it's a concept based on identity politics. So you have this group and that group, the blacks, the gays, the Hispanics, the women, and you try to get them all competing for crumbs from the government table as a basis or as a justification for some sort of revolution to overthrow the elites who rule over us. It's contrary to everything about America, and frankly, it's contrary to the Bible. What we ought to be teaching people is what the Bible says about these issues, and that's real justice based on righteousness, not racial and social justice politics.
Right, and then let me get more specific here then. In these election cycles, in your opinion, is it appropriate for a member of the clergy to go up to his pulpit, to her pulpit, and say, abortion is a moral wrong based off of what we know about the value and sanctity of life in the Bible? So to vote for a candidate who supports an agenda that supports abortion, that's a moral wrong?
That's righteous justice as opposed to social justice. Righteous justice says, let's do what we know is right in an absolute sense, not make up rules as we go along to suit the identity politics that we're trying to play. So yes, every pastor ought to stand up for the lives of unborn children. Every pastor ought to stand up for marriage as the Bible defends it. Those aren't political issues. Those are moral issues.
All right, let me hop back to the topic we were talking about before, this percentage of black Protestant churches that are endorsing Hillary Clinton. So we have this Pew Research poll that says 28% of churchgoers at these black Protestant churches have heard clergy speak about their support for Hillary Clinton. Only 20% said they've heard opposition, or I'm sorry, 20% said they've heard opposition to Trump. Only 7% have heard opposition to Hillary. Bishop, what's it going to take to convince the black community that Hillary's policies will actually decrease their overall quality of life?
Liz, it's going to take a spiritual awakening. You know, the black community is captive to a whole slew of lies. The Democrat Party has done absolutely nothing for the black community for a generation except destroy their families and keep them captive to poverty and dependence upon the government. And it's going to take a spiritual awakening for people to realize, A, they ought to be depending upon God, not government, and B, they ought to open themselves up to ideas that could work rather than following the same old tired bromides that have produced nothing but made things worse.
Right, and the ironic part of that is that spiritual awakening should be it should be sparked by these very clergy that are standing up there and supporting Hillary Clinton. Bishop Jackson, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Our next tipping point with Nicole Graham is the 50 national security experts who disavowed Donald Trump. Stick with us. We're back in a minute.